Call came on a Tuesday morning, which I remember because I had just poured my second cup of coffee and was standing at the kitchen window watching the sparrows fight over the feeder. My phone buzzed on the counter. I almost let it go to voicemail. I didn't. "Mom?" Her voice was wrong. Not crying wrong. Something quieter than that. Something hollowed out. "Where are you?" I asked. I didn't say hello. I didn't ask what happened. 63 years of living teaches you that when someone's voice sounds like that, the details come second. She told me she was at Riverside Park, the one near the fountain, by the old oak trees. She had the kids with her. I put down my coffee cup without drinking it. I found her on a bench near the east entrance, the one with the broken armrest I told the city about twice, and they'd never fixed. She was sitting very straight, the way she does when she's trying not to fall apart. My granddaughter Poppy, 4 years old, was asleep against her shoulder with her mouth slightly open. 2 rolling suitcases stood in the grass beside the bench like silent witnesses. My daughter looked up when she heard my footsteps on the gravel path. She was 31 years old, and she looked about 12. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. I sat down next to her. Poppy stirred but didn't wake. I looked at the suitcases, then back at my daughter. "Tell me," I said. "Her name is Naomi. She has her father's eyes and my stubbornness, which is a combination that has caused her both considerable trouble and considerable success in life. She married a man named Brandon 3 years ago. I was cautious about Brandon from the beginning, not because he was unkind. He wasn't, not exactly, but because he was weak in the particular way that men raised entirely in their father's shadow tend to be weak. He agreed with whatever his father said. He always had, even when his father was wrong. His father's name was Clifton Marsh. He ran a mid-sized commercial real estate company called Marsh Holdings, and he had spent approximately 40 years believing that being wealthy made him correct about everything. Naomi had been working at Marsh Holdings for 2 years. Brandon had pushed for it, Clifton had agreed, and Naomi, practical, organized, good with numbers, had turned out to be genuinely useful. She worked in the acquisitions department. She was good at her job. She knew she was good at her job. She knew she was good at her job. That, I think, was part of the problem. "He called me into his office yesterday afternoon," she said. She was speaking quietly, watching Poppy's sleeping face. "He said the company was restructuring. He said my position was being eliminated." She paused. "Then he told me to clear out my desk before 5 o'clock. In front of other people?" "His assistant was there, and Craig from legal." I filed that away. "Brandon was in the building," she continued. "I texted him. He didn't come down. He didn't come down," I repeated. "He texted back. He said..." She stopped, swallowed. "He said his father must have had his reasons and that I should be gracious about it." I looked out at the park. A man was walking a yellow Labrador that kept stopping to sniff at everything. A child was rolling down a small grassy hill and laughing. Ordinary Tuesday morning, the world carrying on. "He called me last night," she said. "Clifton. He said that Poppy and I needed to be out of the house by end of week. He said the house is in Brandon's name, which is in Marsh Holdings' corporate structure, and it was company policy to..." She made a short, bitter sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "He used a lot of words, Mom. What it came down to was, get out." "And Brandon?" She was quiet for a moment. "Brandon said he needed time to think." I put my arm around her. Poppy shifted in her sleep and made a small sound. "Naomi," I said, "how long have you known I used to work in commercial real estate?" She looked at me. "Since I was a kid." "You always said you did finance for a while." "Finance," I agreed, "for a while." What I had not told her, what I had not told most people because I learned long ago that quiet is its own kind of power, was that for a while had lasted 22 years. I had started as an analyst at a small property investment firm in 1989. By 2003, I was running my own fund. By 2011, when I stepped back, I had structured, financed, or acquired interests in commercial properties in 11 states. I had also, 8 years ago, taken a minority stake in a struggling regional real estate holding company through a private vehicle my attorney managed. That company was called Marsh Holdings. I had never met Clifton Marsh in person. He had never thought to find out who his silent investors were. "Come on," I said to Naomi. I stood up and held out my hand to help her with Poppy. "Get the suitcases. You're staying with me." "Mom, I can get a hotel." "You will not get a hotel. You will not get a hotel. You have a daughter and 2 suitcases, and you're going to come home with me, and I'm going to make you eggs, and you're going to let me." She almost smiled. Almost. I made eggs. Poppy woke up disoriented and then immediately interested in the ceramic rooster I keep on the kitchen shelf that she has always called Mr. Chicken. Naomi sat at the table and drank orange juice and slowly told me the rest of it. The house had been in Brandon's name from the beginning. Naomi had thought this was a paperwork convenience. She had signed things without reading them carefully enough, which she now understood was a mistake, but which was also entirely understandable because she had been 28 and in love and trusting her husband to handle the family's interests. She had no employment contract. She had been paid as a contractor through a subsidiary. There was nothing in writing that said she couldn't be terminated with 12 hours' notice. Clifton had been careful. That told me something. After I settled Poppy down for a nap, I went to my office, a small room off the back of the house that most people assume is a guest bedroom, and I opened my laptop. I found my attorney's number. Her name is Patricia. I stopped myself. Her name is a woman I have worked with for 16 years who does not get flustered, who responds to urgent messages even when she is on vacation. I sent her a message. "I need to look at my Marsh Holdings documentation, particularly the shareholder agreement and any outstanding governance provisions, tonight if you can." Then I sat for a moment and thought about Clifton Marsh. I had never looked into him closely. When you hold minority positions across many companies, you can't scrutinize everyone. You rely on your advisors, the numbers, the structures. I had trusted the structure on this one. The fund had returned modest gains. I had not thought about it much. I thought about it now. I pulled up the company's public filings. Marsh Holdings was privately held, so the filings were limited, but there were state-level registrations, a few press mentions of commercial deals, some Chamber of Commerce items. Clifton's name was everywhere. His son Brandon's name had recently appeared on 2 of the company's active development projects as a co-principal. A woman named Diane Marsh, the wife I assumed was listed as secretary on the original articles of incorporation. Nothing unusual there. Nothing usual there. Nothing yet. Then I searched his name alongside a few terms I'd learned to search over the years when something felt slightly off about a company. Marsh Holdings dispute, Marsh Holdings lawsuit, Clifton Marsh judgment. The third search gave me something. A filing from 4 years ago. A former employee named Thomas Whelan had filed a civil complaint against Marsh Holdings, alleging irregular accounting practices and misclassification of expenses. The complaint had been settled out of court. The terms were confidential. Companies that settle quickly and quietly are sometimes just protecting their reputation from nuisance suits. Sometimes they're protecting something else. I picked up the phone and called someone I had not spoken to in about 2 years. His name is not important. What is important is that he spent 30 years as a forensic accountant for the SEC before retiring to consult privately, and he owed me a significant favor from a situation I helped him out of in 2017. And when I told him I needed a quiet preliminary review of a private company's financial patterns, nothing official, just a preliminary read, he said he would look at what was available and get back to me within 48 hours. "Who is it?" he asked. I told him. There was a brief pause. "Marsh Holdings? I'd seen that name somewhere." "I imagine you might have," I said. My attorney called me back that evening. She had pulled the shareholder agreement. As a minority stakeholder, I had limited governance rights, but I had rights. I had the right to request a financial audit under certain triggering conditions. I had the right to call a meeting of stakeholders if I believed the company's value was being materially misrepresented. "Define materially misrepresented," I said. "In the context of this agreement? Evidence of financial irregularities that could affect the company's stated valuation or the integrity of reported returns. How much evidence do I need before I can make a formal request?" She was quiet for a moment. "A credible basis. It doesn't have to be proven. It has to be credible." "I'm working on credible," I said. Naomi knocked on the door of my office around 9 that evening. She was in the pajamas she kept at my house. She has always left a few things here since she was a teenager, and this was just who we are to each other. She looked better than she had in the park. Not good, better. Poppy asked if we're going on vacation, she said. I told her we were staying at Grandma's house for a little while. Good answer. She leaned against the door frame. Mom, what are you doing? Reading some old documents. You have that look. What look? The one you get when you're thinking about a problem from the inside. I turned in my chair to face her. Naomi, do you know why Clifton fired you? The real reason? She shook her head slowly. He said restructuring. He fired you, I said, because he needed you out of the acquisitions department. You were too close to the numbers. Whatever he's been doing, you were starting to see it, and maybe you didn't even know you were starting to see it. But he did. She stared at me. What do you mean? Was there anything in the last few months? Something that seemed odd? A project that didn't add up? A vendor you didn't recognize? Anything that struck you and you pushed aside? She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, there was a consulting firm. It started showing up in expense reports 6 months ago. Big payments. I asked the senior VP about it once and she got very strange and said it was part of a new strategic initiative. Do you remember the name of the firm? She remembered. I wrote it down. My forensic accountant friend called back in 36 hours instead of 48, which meant he had found something. The consulting firm? I said. Doesn't appear to do any actual consulting, he said. The address is a registered agent in Delaware. No website, no employees in any public database, no professional licenses. It has taken in approximately $800,000 from Marsh Holdings over the past 14 months. I exhaled slowly. There's more, he said. 2 of the recent development projects have cost overruns that don't track with local construction data. And there's a property sale from 2 years ago where the reported sale price and the county tax record don't match by about $300,000. I did not say anything for a moment. Is this enough? I asked my attorney when I called her next. I laid out what I'd been given, carefully, without attribution. That's more than credible, she said. That's a formal basis. You can request a full independent audit, and if they refuse or obstruct, they'll refuse, I said. Clifton Marsh is not the kind of man who cooperates. If they refuse, you can apply for a court order, and the act of refusing itself starts to look like something. I know what it starts to look like, I said. My attorney sent the formal request on a Friday afternoon. The letter went to Marsh Holdings' registered legal counsel and to Clifton Marsh personally. It was a standard shareholder audit request, dense with legal language, signed and certified. Nowhere in the letter did it say my name. It said the name of my investment vehicle, Callaway Capital Partners. I had formed it in 1998. I had named it for my mother. Ruth Callaway was a woman who once drove 400 miles by herself to pick me up from a place I should not have been at 20 years old, who asked no questions until I was ready to answer them, and who taught me that help is most powerful when it arrives before it's asked for. I don't talk about the fund much. I don't need to. On Monday morning, my daughter, who was staying in my guest room, who had been taking Poppy to the park each afternoon and trying to keep her routine as normal as possible, who had not heard from Brandon in 5 days, received an unexpected phone call. It was from Clifton Marsh. She brought the phone to me. He wants to talk to you. I raised an eyebrow. He figured it out, she said. I don't know how, but he figured out the connection. I took the phone. Mrs. Callaway. His voice was carefully controlled. A man used to being in charge, recalibrating. I think there's been a misunderstanding about some internal company matters. I don't think there's been a misunderstanding, I said pleasantly. I think there's been a request for an audit. I'd like to meet, in person. I think if we sit down together we can… Mr. Marsh, I said, my attorneys handle my business matters. You're welcome to have your people contact them. The audit request is formal and on record. The timeline is in the letter. I paused. Is there anything else? He was quiet. That silence told me more than anything he could have said. My daughter, I said, is a good employee. She's organized, precise, and she's excellent with complex data. I think you knew that. Another pause. I think you knew that rather well. I handed the phone back to Naomi and went to refill my coffee. They refused the audit request. I had expected this. My attorney filed for a court order. As part of that filing, the documented discrepancies, the shell consulting firm, the mismatched property records, the irregular cost overruns, became part of the official court record, which meant they became discoverable, which meant they were no longer quiet. The story was not large enough for major press, but it was large enough for the commercial real estate trade publications that Clifton Marsh's peers and partners read over their coffee each morning. 2 of Marsh Holdings' lending partners requested a review of their exposure. One institutional investor sent their own auditors. A former employee contacted my attorney's office, unsolicited, with documentation. Then another one. Clifton Marsh, I learned through subsequent filings, had been extracting money from the company for years through the shell firm. The payments had been structured carefully, never quite large enough to trigger automatic review thresholds, and most of the people who saw pieces of the picture either didn't understand what they were seeing or understood and looked away. Naomi had started asking questions. That was why she had to go. The court-ordered audit was completed over 8 weeks. The findings were referred to the state attorney general's office. Clifton Marsh, in the middle of all this, attempted to sell 2 of the company's properties to an entity he controlled privately, which is the kind of decision frightened men make when they can feel the ground shifting. The court froze the transactions. Brandon called Naomi on a Wednesday afternoon. I know this because Naomi told me afterward, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea growing cold in front of her. He wants to work things out, she said. I waited. He said his father never told him what he was doing, that he didn't know, that he feels terrible. She wrapped both hands around the mug. He said he loves me. I'm sure he does, I said. The question is whether love is sufficient. She looked up at me. I'm not telling you what to decide, I said. You're not 22. You know the difference between a man who made one frightened mistake and a man who has a pattern. You know which one he is. I just want you to be honest with yourself about it. She nodded slowly. Did he come down from his office? I asked. When you texted him from the building, did he come down? She was quiet for a long moment. No, she said, he didn't come down. I didn't say anything. Some things don't need to be said. The company went through a restructuring, a real one, this time enforced by the court and managed by an independent administrator. Clifton Marsh stepped down from all positions pending the investigation. Brandon, who was found to have had no direct knowledge of the fraud, retained his equity stake, much diminished in value, and was removed from his role as co-principal on the development projects. Naomi filed for divorce in the spring. It was not dramatic. It was just a door, closing quietly. She found an apartment for herself and Poppy, a good one, on the 3rd floor of a building with a little balcony and a view of a small park. I helped her carry boxes. Poppy immediately claimed the bedroom with the blue door as hers and announced that Mr. Chicken needed to come visit soon. I drove home that evening in the late light and sat for a while in my car in the driveway. There were sparrows on the feeder again. People sometimes ask me not about the situation, because most people don't know about this situation, but about business in general, about how I've navigated things over the years. They ask if it gets easier. Knowing when to act. Knowing when to stay quiet and when to move. I always say it gets clearer. Not easier exactly, but clearer. I raised my daughter to be precise and honest and good at her work. She was all of those things. She walked into a building every day and did her job well, and someone looked at that competence and saw a liability instead of an asset because he had something to hide and she was getting close to it. He didn't know who her mother was. That was his mistake. Not his only one, but the one that cost him the most. I didn't do any of it to protect my investment. I want to be clear about that. The money was not the point. The money was never the point. I did it because she was sitting on a bench with 2 suitcases and a sleeping 4-year-old, and her voice was wrong. And 63 years of living had given me the tools to do something about it. I don't consider what happened to Clifton Marsh to be revenge. Revenge implies I wanted him to suffer. I didn't want him to suffer. I wanted him to stop. I wanted accountability, and I wanted my daughter to be able to build her life without someone else's corruption sitting in the middle of it like a stone. That's what happened. On the first warm weekend of that spring, Naomi brought Poppy to my house for lunch. Poppy ran straight to the kitchen shelf to check on Mr. Chicken, who was, as always, holding his post with great dignity. We sat on the back porch and ate sandwiches, and Poppy fell asleep on the porch swing with one arm hanging off the side. Naomi said, "Mom, I want to ask you something." "Ask." "When you came to the park that morning, you said get in the car before I even told you everything. Before I told you about the job or the house or any of it." "Yes," I said. "How did you already know what to do?" I looked at my granddaughter sleeping in the spring sunlight, her mouth slightly open, her hand relaxed. She looked like her mother at that age. She looked like she had nothing to worry about. "Because you're my daughter," I said, "and because I've been building things for a very long time, and I know what it looks like when someone tries to take apart something that belongs to the people I love." Naomi leaned her head on my shoulder. Neither of us said anything for a while. The sparrows were at the feeder again. Some things you build so quietly that no one notices them, until someone makes the mistake of reaching for what they don't own, and then you reach back. That's what I did. That's all I did. I've been thinking lately about what Clifton actually did wrong, not the fraud. That was just what the court saw. What he did wrong at the most basic level was assume that the world was arranged the way it looked from where he was standing. From where he was standing, Naomi was a young woman who had married into his family and made herself useful in his company. Easily hired, easily let go. Her mother was some quiet, older woman somewhere, retired, irrelevant. That was the picture he had, and he never thought to question it, because men like Clifton rarely question the pictures they've decided are true. That kind of blindness isn't stupidity. Clifton was not a stupid man. It's something more specific than that. It's the particular carelessness of someone who has gone a long time without real consequences. When nothing pushes back, you stop expecting anything to. You start making decisions based on how things appear rather than what they actually are. He looked at Naomi and saw someone without leverage. He looked at her mother and saw nothing at all. Both of those assessments were wrong, and they were wrong because he never looked carefully enough to find out. I think about the people who did look carefully. Thomas Whelan, the former employee who had filed that civil complaint years earlier and been paid to go away quietly. He saw something. He tried to do something about it. The system didn't support him at the time, but he tried. And when my attorney's office reached out later, he came forward again with documentation he had kept. He didn't have to do that. He did it because some part of him had never stopped believing it mattered. That's what I mean when I say the choices we make accumulate. Clifton spent years making choices that chipped away at things, at his employees, at his company's integrity, at his own son's ability to develop a spine. Each individual choice probably seemed manageable, justifiable, easy to rationalize. Taken together, they built something unstable, and unstable things eventually fall. Naomi, by contrast, spent 2 years doing her job honestly and asking questions when numbers didn't add up. That's all she did. She wasn't trying to expose anyone. She was just being precise and truthful the way she was raised to be. And that honesty, that refusal to look away from what didn't make sense, that's what made her dangerous to him. Not power, just integrity. I raised her to have that. I raised her to do her work carefully and to trust what her own eyes told her, even when someone with authority told her to stop looking. She almost talked herself out of mentioning the consulting firm to me. She almost set it aside as something she'd probably misunderstood. I'm glad she didn't. I'm glad she trusted that small, persistent sense that something was wrong. Poppy will grow up watching her mother rebuild. She'll watch Naomi choose honesty over comfort, precision over convenience, self-respect over the easier path of staying somewhere she wasn't valued. She won't remember this specific year, but she'll absorb it. Children absorb the shape of things even when they don't understand the details. What I want for her, What I want for anyone watching this is simply the willingness to look clearly at the world around you and to trust what you see. To do your work with integrity even when no one seems to notice. To understand that the quiet decisions you make every day are building something whether you intend them to or not. And to know that the people who underestimate you because you're not loud about what you have and what you know, those people are not seeing clearly. That is their limitation, not yours. Clifton Marsh had 22 years of building too. He just built the wrong things.